In the summer of 2005, the most experienced Special Operations Commander in the United States military sat down and, in effect, asked for help. His name was Stanley McChrystal. He ran the most secretive task force the Americans had. Delta Force, the Rangers, the surveillance fleet, the whole machine. And that summer, that machine was losing. The car bombs in Baghdad were coming faster than his men could find the people building them. His operators were taking casualties on raids that produced nothing. And so McChrystal did something the American Special Operations community almost never does. He pressed for the British to come and fight inside his organization. The squadron he asked for had spent 2 years being sidelined in Baghdad. Some of their American counterparts had a nickname for them. They called them Task Force Slack. 18 months later, no one was using that name. This is what changed, and what the Americans said when it did. To understand what happened in Baghdad in 2005, you have to go back 64 years, to a hospital bed in North Africa. In the summer of 1941, a British officer named David Stirling, a lieutenant in No. 8 Commando, was recovering from a parachuting accident in Cairo. He used the time to write a memo arguing for something the conventional military had never properly attempted. Small, independent teams, no fixed bases, operating deep behind enemy lines with speed and surprise. Stirling's case was built on arithmetic. A large formation made noise, could be spotted and countered. A small team, guided by intelligence, could destroy more than a full division at a fraction of the cost, and be gone before the enemy understood what had happened. Middle East headquarters accepted the argument. L Detachment, SAS Brigade, was formally established that July. "Who dares wins," that was Stirling's phrase. It remains 22 Special Air Service Regiments' motto today. The doctrine survived Malaya, Borneo, Oman, and the Falklands. It was refined across 2 decades in Northern Ireland, where operators spent weeks, sometimes months, building an intelligence picture before anyone moved. The Loughgall ambush in May 1987, which killed 8 members of the IRA's East Tyrone Brigade, was the product of intelligence developed well ahead of the shooting. Security forces had received word of the plan at least 10 days before the attack. Patient, source-heavy, act only when you know. That was the regiment's institutional DNA. And it was precisely the method that put them at odds with Stanley McChrystal when they arrived in Iraq in 2003. The British contingent deployed to Baghdad in spring 2003, initially operating under the American designation Task Force 14, within the JSOC framework controlling America's most sensitive counter-terrorism operations in the country. On paper, that placed them at the center of the campaign. In practice, it didn't work out that way. The American machine was already running at a pace the British weren't yet integrated into. There were targets they weren't assigned, operations they sat out. Mark Urban, the BBC defence correspondent, whose 2010 book Task Force Black remains the foundational record of the campaign, based on interviews with participants, documented that some American operators had taken to calling the British element Task Force Slack. The name reflected a US perception that UK national caveats were limiting the British contribution. Those caveats deserve a plain statement. British Special Forces operated under UK rules of engagement even inside an American command structure. They were subject to UK law, including the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights. When JSOC was running detainees through facilities that British operators regarded as operating outside Geneva Convention standards, the British wouldn't participate. They refused to transfer prisoners to sites beyond UK oversight. Stephen Gray's reporting and Urban's account both document this friction. The Americans weren't wrong that British participation came with conditions. The British weren't wrong about what those conditions were protecting. Both things were true at the same time, and neither side was going to resolve the tension quickly. Meanwhile, the campaign was running ahead of everyone. On 22nd of July 2003, Delta Force operators and soldiers from the US Army's 101st Airborne Division killed Uday Hussein and Qusay Hussein in a villa in the Mosul suburb of Al-Falah after a 4-hour gun battle. The British had reportedly conducted reconnaissance of the building beforehand and pushed to take the assault themselves. Whether that recommendation was formally made and refused isn't independently confirmed. What is confirmed is that the raid was American. The British watched. The nickname Slack was already circulating. By late 2003, McChrystal had assumed command of JSOC and was attempting something without precedent in counter-terrorism. He wanted to transform his task force into an engine, one that could locate an insurgent network, hit it, exploit whatever intelligence the raid produced, and use that intelligence to strike the next node in the same network before it could reconstitute. That same night, every night. The operational framework had an acronym, F3EA: Find, Fix, Finish, Exploit, Analyze. Intelligence from one raid fed directly into the next. Signals intelligence fused with human intelligence and real-time unmanned aerial surveillance. The key insight, which appears in Urban's account of McChrystal's own words, was this: you've got to build a network to defeat a network. The goal was to move faster than the enemy could replace what it lost. Analytical literature confirms the tempo sharpened significantly from May to October 2005. The phrase for what McChrystal was building was industrial counter-terrorism, and in almost every respect it ran on different assumptions than the Northern Ireland method. In Northern Ireland, the SAS didn't move until a target had been developed over weeks, sometimes months. You built the picture. You understood the routes, the faces, the habits, the network connections. You acted when you already knew the outcome. McChrystal's system demanded the reverse. Act tonight. Learn from tonight. Act again tomorrow. The intelligence window was hours, not weeks. The two cultures clashed, and the friction was purely doctrinal. Each approach suited the logic of its own environment. What McChrystal's machine struggled with, despite its scale, its aircraft, its signals architecture, was the one thing the Northern Ireland method produced reliably: a developed source placed inside an enemy network, patient enough to know what was happening inside a building before it happened. That was the missing piece. By mid-2005, the pressure to find it was acute. The insurgency was regenerating faster than JSOC could disrupt it. The car bombs kept coming. McChrystal, through direct conversations with British SF leadership in Baghdad, began pressing for deeper integration, a process that ran alongside formal approvals moving through Whitehall. On 23rd of July 2005, an intelligence report arrived that demonstrated what the combination of these two methods could produce. The intelligence came from an agent run by MI6, a source embedded within the insurgent network. The report was time-sensitive. 3 suicide bombers were preparing to leave a safe house in Baghdad. All 3 were wearing vests. Their targets were believed to be cafes used by Iraqi police, busy during the morning rush hour. The window to act was short. JSOC would normally have handled a target of this type directly. Their main force that morning was committed to a concurrent operation codenamed Snake Eyes. The mission was passed to Task Force Black. The commanders assessed their options. A dynamic assault, breaching the building and clearing rooms, was ruled out. If any one of the three bombers detonated his vest inside the structure, the walls would amplify the blast. The casualties could be catastrophic. The only viable approach was to engage all three men simultaneously in the open the moment they left the building, before any one of them could reach for a switch. Not two shots and then a third, simultaneously. Because a man still alive after the shot beside him would have a fraction of a second to press a trigger. A sniper element from Task Force Black took up positions in covert urban observation posts around the building. The exact unit composition is disputed. Some accounts credit 22 SAS sniper teams. Others, including Mark Urban's primary account, describe the operation as led by M Squadron of the Special Boat Service, with support from G Squadron, 22 SAS, and American assets. The element numbered around 16 men, built around 4 sniper pairs, shooter and spotter in each. The remaining men provided security and covered the exits. The weapon was almost certainly the L115A, chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, the standard long-range precision rifle carried by UK Special Forces in that period, though no open source explicitly confirms the designation for this specific operation. A US overhead surveillance platform kept the building under continuous observation throughout. A platoon of US Army Rangers was positioned nearby as a quick reaction force. They waited. Just past 8 in the morning, the bombers came out. The command was given over the radio. 3 snipers fired, the 4th held as a reserve. Each man was hit. No device detonated. No one else was hurt. Urban's account, drawn on by multiple sources, describes a more layered sequence. One bomber ran toward the advancing assault element and detonated early. No coalition casualties, though the blast caused a Puma helicopter overhead to briefly lose control before the pilot recovered. A second bomber was shot, fleeing the rear of the building. A third was killed inside at close range by an SBS NCO and a team leader. Explosive vest components were found throughout the building afterward, left for bomb disposal to handle. 2 reconstructions, different in tactical detail, identical in their result. 3 men who had planned to detonate themselves in a crowded Baghdad cafe during the morning rush hour were dead before they reached their targets. The intelligence that made the operation possible had come from a human being, carefully cultivated, placed inside an enemy network run by MI6. Urban framed it this way: a rare, successful preemptive act against the Iraqi insurgency, one that was the result not just of tactical skill, but of the intelligence gathered by MI6. The machine provided the speed, the source provided the target. Operation Marlborough was one operation in a campaign that, by the time it ended, had worked through the JSOC target list in a way neither side had fully anticipated in 2003. Sean Raymond reported in The Daily Telegraph in August 2008 that a single Task Force Black rotation conducted approximately 175 combat missions during a 6-month tour. That is a journalistic estimate, not an audited count. But even as an estimate, it describes tempo that had no precedent in the regiment's history. The nightly raids, the target lists cycling through, the network thinning. In March 2006, Task Force Black was given a different kind of operation. 4 members of a Christian aid organization, Christian peacemaker teams, had been kidnapped in Baghdad. 3 were still alive. Norman Kember, a British peace activist, 74 years old, was among them. Tom Fox, the American member of the group, had been killed on 9th March. Kember and 2 Canadians, Harmeet Singh Sudhan and James Loney, were found and freed on 23rd of March 2006. The operation was bloodless. Their captors had already left by the time the assault force arrived. Kemba told The Guardian in April 2006 that his liberators were SAS gents. On the 6th of September 2007, a 30-man team assaulted the house of a senior al-Qaeda figure in Baghdad. The mission succeeded. One SAS soldier was killed. He was one of an estimated 6 UK Special Forces personnel who didn't come home from the Task Force Black campaign, according to reported figures in Urban's account and Raymond's reporting. Around 30 more were wounded. Those are reported figures for UK Special Forces broadly. They aren't a Ministry of Defence tally, but they are the numbers in the record. The Guardian's review of Urban's book recorded that over the course of the campaign, the task force, rarely exceeding 150 personnel at any one time, killed or captured more than 3,500 people. Between 350 and 400 were killed. The majority were captured. Most of the dead were senior militants. The British contribution multiplied the American effort, which had been Sterling's arithmetic all along. In an interview with the Daily Telegraph, McChrystal was asked about the SAS and SBS contribution to defeating the Sunni-led insurgency in Iraq. He gave a 2-sentence answer. Essential. Couldn't have done it without them. That is a direct quote. The Kuna news agency's Wire from March 2010 confirmed the statement and reported something else alongside it. McChrystal revealed he had been involved in SAS missions to kill leaders of the insurgency. He wasn't describing a contribution observed from a headquarters building. He had been there. McChrystal's 2013 memoir, My Share of the Task, covers his JSOC command in detail. Reviews confirm the book addresses the Iraq campaign and the coalition relationship at length. His public statements consistently support Urban's account. He also, in reporting from that period, specifically singled out the SAS's A Squadron for its performance in 2007. The reversal was complete. The squadron that some American operators had written off as too cautious, too conditioned by legal constraints, too slow, task force slack, was described by the same command as essential to the outcome. That word belongs to McChrystal. The judgment is on the record. What the reversal actually demonstrates is worth being precise about. The British continued operating under UK rules of engagement throughout. They continued to decline participation in practices the American system used without restriction. What changed was McChrystal's understanding of what the British method was actually producing. The patient intelligence work, the developed source, the long-cultivated agent, was the foundation the operational cycle depended on. Without quality intelligence, F3EA was simply raids producing nothing, which was exactly how McChrystal described the problem in the summer of 2005. The British brought the intelligence craft. The Americans provided the scale. Together, they cleared the network. David Sterling's 1941 argument that a small, intelligence-led force can achieve what mass and technology can't was vindicated not in the North African desert, but in a city 6 decades later by the general who commanded the most powerful special operations machine on Earth and still found himself needing something the British had that his own machine didn't. In 2003, they were called Task Force Slack. A British squadron parked on the edge of someone else's war, handed jobs nobody wanted, kept at arm's length by allies who didn't yet need them. 2 years later, the most powerful special operations commander in the world asked for them by name, because his own machine was losing and theirs wasn't. 6 UK Special Forces personnel didn't come home. 30 were wounded. And when it was over, the American general did the one thing the British would never do for themselves. He said it out loud. Subscribe for more stories like this.